Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this episode of BrightSign Live. I'm your co-host, Matt Harnack, and I work as a video producer here at BrightSign. I produce a lot of the learning videos to educate our customers and some of the promotional material as well. Today, I'm joined by solutions architect John Arnio. John, what solutions are you working on these days?
All sorts of solutions. Yeah, that's mostly what I do is just helping our customers understand our ecosystem and just what's possible, with our products. But more importantly, as you're going to see today, what's possible with our products and some of our partners. That's kind of a running theme that we've got lately. So today's show is going to be really, really exciting to cover all of that. So
Yeah,
looking
I'm really
forward to it.
excited about it too. In
Yeah.
this hour, we are going to show you how to use the Nexmosphere Xperience platform using BrightSign media players to create interactive digital signage installations. And by the end of the show, our goal is that you will feel confident offering state-of-the-art interactive digital signage projects to potential clients, even if you haven't worked out all of the details yet. As a reminder, we'd like to tell you a little bit about some of our resources that we have available to our customers. We have the doc site, and the doc site contains, that's the one in the middle. The doc site contains user guides, reference manuals, developer notes, step-by-step procedures for all BrightSign products and services. And then on the left, we've got BrightSign Academy. BrightSign Academy is a series of courses that covers BrightSign and all of its products. So the courses start off with just the basics and they progress to more advanced topics. You don't need any prior experience to get started. And we invite you to join BrightSign Academy at your convenience. We also offer Alexa credits for BrightSign Academy and a pathway to become a BrightSign authorized reseller. And lastly, we also have the knowledge base. And our knowledge base is our support hub. It contains everything you need to know to get started with BrightSign. You can use the QR codes to get started with these resources, or you can find them on our website, brightsign.biz. And the chat is open. I'd like to say that we welcome you to talk in the chat, and we will be also answering questions live at the end of the show. So even though the chat is open, please ask your questions by pressing the ask button, and we will do our best to answer them at the end of the show. And that ask button will be able to, if you use the chat or if you use the questions ask button, we'll be able to flash your question live at the end of the show on the screen. So today we have a guest partner, and that is Ivo Wouters. He's the program manager for Nexmosphere. He is, so Ivo, can you tell us a little bit about the Nexmosphere Xperience platform and go over what we're going to talk about today?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. Much appreciated. I'm really happy to be here. So with Nexmosphere, we develop and manufacture a sensor platform specifically designed for digital signage. So we have this whole suite of sensors, such as a presence sensor, RFID, pickup sensors, which you can all connect to a BrightSign player to create an interactive digital signage presentation. So for example, let's say you have a presence sensor, you can use that sensor and its input to start a presentation when somebody walks up to your display and switch back to another video, for example, a looping call to action when that person walks away again. And what we really see now is that although the amount of the percentage of digital signage installations which are using a sensor is still relatively small, it is increasing and growing very fast. Because even by just adding one simple sensor, you can already drastically improve the impact which the content on the screen has, as it can react to what is happening in front or next to your screen, and thereby increasing the effectiveness of the content and also hopefully make it a more engaging experience. So today we have an interesting program for for you guys. We will, of course, explain a bit more in depth what the core concepts are of the sensor platform, and of course also how to integrate those into a BrightAuthor connection presentation. We will start with a really simple example and then move on to some more intermediate presentations. And in the end, John will also show you that you can even use the Nexmosphere platform in a complete HTML JavaScript environment, if that's what you like to do.
Sounds great. Yeah, and I think the reason for the core concepts, from my perspective, just kind of sharing my experience starting with the Nexmosphere ecosystem, working with the BrightSign ecosystem. It was one of those things that struck me at first as being very complicated, potentially, but I was completely wrong. You've done an amazing job at Nexmosphere at simplifying and really, making the information accessible. And what we found, and through our discussions, this all comes down to some core concepts, and then we think if you understand what those core concepts are, you can do anything. So that's what we want to really do today is get to those core concepts, make those very clear. And it just opens up a whole world of potentials.
Absolutely.
So let's get started.
Yeah.
We've got a little bit of a tabletop build. We're gonna start really, really small, really focused, and just start introducing it. So just to kind of lay the scene of what I've got here, we're gonna start with hardware, core concepts again. I've got a BrightSign player. This is an XT1144. We've got a screen here, which we'll power on here shortly. But I'm going to start laying out what it takes to build, a Nexmosphere experience. So, Evo, what we will start with is the brains of the operation. So this is our XN185. Let's get a little closer shot of this guy. So talk me through this, because this is really where this starts. This is the controller, right?
Indeed. So if you look high level to our product portfolio, it basically consists out of two types of products. One is the sensors, which we will move on to in a bit. And the other one are the controllers, which we see an example of over here. So this basically is a little hub to which you can connect up to 8 of our sensors. And indeed, this acts as the brain, as the bridge between the sensors and the BrightSign player. Right. So the first thing we can do is connect one of our sensors to one of the interfaces on the controller.
Yeah, so I'm going to take this this controller here, and I'm going to use this is something you were gracious enough to provide. This is an air button, so an XTEF30 air button.
Exactly. It's basically it works almost the same as a normal button, right? So you can touch it and release it, but because it's an air button, you don't actually need to physically touch it. You can just hover your hand above the sensor, and it will see that as a button input, which we will see in a bit.
Right. Okay. So because the controller is a USB hub, this sensor itself, as are all of your sensors, if I'm not mistaken, they are USB. So it's a micro A or mini A.
It's a mini USB.
Mini A, right?
So all of our sensors have this same interface,
and all your controllers have the corresponding
exactly,
for that, right?
Exactly. So all of our controllers can be combined with all of our sensors and used to sort of combine and mix and match them onto one single controller and installation.
Okay, and so the next step that we're going to do is on all of your controllers, there is a micro USB connection, and this is what goes into the BrightSign player. So in my case, because I'm using this XT1144 front mount port, I'm actually going to use the USB-C. You could use the USB-A, which is on the back, equally as the same. So I actually just have a straight USB-C to USB-C with a micro adapter in between, just to show that this is possible. You can do this. So so we'll connect this up via USB, and that's basically it from a hardware standpoint. It's USB controller to sensor, right?
That's it. Absolutely.
As simple as it gets. Okay, so a couple other quick points. The fact that this is USB to the BrightSign, one important distinction, it's in fact serial data is the connection type, right?
Yes. So although it's from a physical perspective, it is a USB connection. The data which is being sent between the controller and the BrightSign player, it's all serial communication. So it's all serial commands which is being sent back and forth.
Exactly. Okay. All right. So, I mean, that's kind of it from a hardware standpoint. Not much to do there. Plug it in. But one other sort of, reminder from a best practices standpoint, everything is off. So that's
Yeah.
one thing you had to keep reminding me of this because I tend to not follow best practices all the time.
Indeed. So yeah.
Get it
So in
plugged
order
in
to make
first.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Got
First
it.
connect the sensors and the controller to the BrightSign player, and then power the player.
Perfect.
That's always a good order. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Now let's fire all this up. So we're going to turn the BrightSign player on. And I'm going to switch over and we're going to show you the software side of things of how to get this working. We're going to start with BrightAuthor connected. And before we go through this example, I'll show you a little bit of background of what I've done in the presentation, just so you know what to expect. I've got a 2-zone presentation. One zone is a full screen video. This is going to be a background video, just more or less for eye candy. It doesn't offer any functionality. But the heart of this is in a zone sitting on top, which is going to be mostly text-based elements that we're going to show on screen as we go through these examples. From a presentation setup standpoint, the only thing that you really have to be mindful of is establishing these parameters here for the serial port. And this is something you guys have done an amazing job documenting. It's just establishing that port 2 needs these parameters. So if you ever need a reference, I would definitely check out your website for that because you do a great job explaining it. And once you've done that, that's it. I mean, that establishes the connection, and it just really works at that point. Once you publish this presentation. The other thing of note, just so everybody knows how this is working, if you're not super familiar with BrightAuthor Connected, I've created what's called a variable. This is a kind of a utility that you can use in BrightAuthor Connected. It's a placeholder. It's something that I can put data into. I can change the value of and display that on screen. So that's a little bit of a backdrop of how this is working here. So yeah, let's kind of go through this first scenario and explain how we're doing this. So
yes. So indeed, I think what we're going to show here is just showing the live incoming serial message on screen.
Right.
So what you indeed have built, John, is I believe you're using the wildcard feature of BrightAuthor.
Exactly. Yeah. So the what I've got here are a couple states, and this actually brings us to our next core concept. When you're working in BrightAuthor Connected, the first thing to introduce is the concept of states. If you're not familiar or haven't used it, a state can be a media item, an image, a video, an HTML element. In this case, I'm using text elements, these building blocks here. You can ignore this event handler. This is more for demonstration today. But really, this is about putting text on the screen. This is the state. And what I'm actually doing is creating an event here to listen for serial data coming from the BrightSign player. That's what this is here. This brings us to our second core concept, events. States and events are really the foundational building blocks of building presentations. So
how'd you get that? How'd you get that event? Is that an event type?
It is indeed. Yep. So we'll zoom in here. So this is the event that I've got hanging off of this. Events are available up here in this top bar. There's a whole bunch of different types of events, ranging from simple ones like timeouts, videos ending, that sort of thing. So this one in particular is called a serial input event. So if there is some input coming from the serial port of the BrightSign player, that will trigger this event. So with this selected, we can take a look over here, and this is how this event breaks down. We're just giving you a quick background here of how we're building this up, but it is a wild card, as Ivo stated. So we're listening on port 2, and I just want to see anything that comes across that port. Doesn't matter what it is, right? And then I'm going to assign that to a variable, and I'm going to display that variable on screen. So, in my opinion, I'm sure you'd agree, Ivo, as a learning process of working with the sensors, this is a great way to get started, is just set up a basic one state, one event presentation, wildcard the entire thing, and just see what comes in, because now you can learn the syntax.
Absolutely, and it's actually also a great way of learning the sensors itself, because you will just, as we were going to see in a bit, see in a very direct way what the output of the sensor is.
Exactly. All right, so let's do it. So we've got the presentation running here. We've got a little background video. We've got a text element, no value yet. So we've got an arrow button. There's 3 things that I've discovered that this arrow button will do. I can be idle, meaning I'm not within range of the button. I can be just off the button, so it considers this to be far, or I can touch the button and it's considered near. And I can kind of move my hand back and forth. I can be far, I can be away, or I can actually touch it. And that's what's coming in here on this screen. It's just whatever that serial input is, it's sending that string through to the BrightSign player, putting it on screen. It's pretty cool.
Indeed.
That is cool.
Yep. And so just to kind of break down what this means, just as an intro, right? So the syntax looks a little confusing. It looks, very complicated. It's really not. What it really boils down to is the information that's outside of these square brackets and the information inside the square brackets. So outside, it's usually an X, 001, or 00 and a number, and that actually corresponds to the controller port. So
indeed,
plugged
so now
into
we've
port
connected
1.
it to port 1.
Yeah.
And then it will always be X001, which will be the start of the message.
Right.
And if you would connect this sensor in another port, let's say port 3, for example, the message would be the same, but just starting with X003 instead of X001. So that's basically the differentiator to know what sensor is sending that information.
Right. Okay. And that's a good way to learn the port numbers, because they enumerate in a certain way. So plug it in, give yourself a wildcard, see what comes up. So, and then inside of here, inside these brackets, this information that's changing, that's really specific to the sensor you're working with. So that's going to be different for everything, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So we got these three values that we can capture off of this sensor. So what we really need to do is do something with that information, right? So let's actually, create something in our presentation that can work with that information. So this will be our next demo that we're going to run, and this is building a little bit more on this concept here. So walk us through what we're going to show.
Yeah, indeed. So of course, typically what you wanted to do is trigger something, content, audio, video, image, based on the status of the sensor, right? So in this case, that is far, near, or idle. So John, if you could show us one of the serial input events you have.
Yep. So we'll go into here to this first event. And what we've changed in all of this is how we're capturing that event and assigning it to a variable. And instead of wildcarding the entire thing, we're just going to simply capture the specific event that's occurring, the near, the far, and the idle. Yeah. And that's going to give us something a little more readable. It's not as complicated of a string to capture. So, and again, I'm just going to display this on screen as a variable. So all of these are set up as conditionals. So I'm going to do idle, far, and near based on all 3 of those. So we'll send this over to the BrightSign player. Let's publish that and let's take a look. All right, so this one is a little bit more complicated, because not only are we going to update the text values, but we're going to actually change some content on the screen. And this is kind of the point of doing this, right? So here is far. So we're far away. Now we'll get near. We actually touched it. And now we're idle, away. So 3 states, 3 different presentation content changes that are taking place.
Indeed. And maybe just to recap, so you're triggering that content using conditional targets in BrightAuthor connected, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's two building blocks: state, event, state, event. That's it.
yeah,
We're just cycling back and forth through different states, and we're triggering based on events and changing our content on our screen.
exactly. And we're
That's it.
actually just using one event type, which is a serial event.
Exactly. Yeah, one type. Yep. Okay. All right. So that's a good build up. Let's go. Actually, nope. That's the end of that demo. So for the next segment, we've got something a little more advanced. We're going to move away from this setup and kind of go to the next level of hardware here. So while I do that, why don't you talk us through what we're going to show?
Yeah,
Again, I'm going
absolutely.
to power down like I'm supposed to.
So
Let's do this right.
what we've shown so far is just one of our controllers with one of our sensors, right? So a small USB controller with an air button sensor. But as I mentioned, we actually have a whole suite of controllers and sensors, which you can actually implement using the exact same core concepts which we've just shown. So the controller we see now is one of our XC controllers, and it's actually it's almost the same as the controller we used before, in the sense that you can also connect sensors to it using the same mini USB connection. You also connect it to the BrightSign player using the micro USB connection on the right over there. But there are actually two differences. So one is that this controller has a separate power input, which you see over there, which is used to power the LED outputs, which are dedicated on this side of the controller. So that's a really an additional feature of this controller, that you can connect, power, and control LED strips straight from this controller and control them using BrightAuthor.
All right, so let's connect this all up. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to put your controller here upside down just for cable management.
It's fine. It had enough airtime.
Exactly. All right, so everything is off. So I am going to connect the USB to the player first. That's fine. All right, so let's introduce our next sensor. This is cool.
Yeah, so this is one of our newest sensors, which is our XRDR2 RFID sensor. So this can read and write N tags. So those are RFID tags which can do NFC communication.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just going to show you a few cool things which you can do with these RFID tags in a digital signage presentation, and of course also show you how to do the LEDs with it.
Yeah, and so just a quick recap on the NFC tags, just in case you haven't seen these. I mean, most people have hopefully seen these somewhere.
Yeah,
they are usually hidden. They're actually little tiny stickers.
Indeed.
And there's circuitry, inside of these. So that is an NFC tag, which is going to be read by the RFID sensor.
Exactly, and typically those tags are placed, for example, on the bottom of merchandise in retail stores.
Right. Okay. And the last thing, just from a connectivity standpoint, we're going to go ahead and plug this guy in. We'll use this in an upcoming demo. But this is a relatively new product, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Indeed. So usually our clients just directly connect the good old LED strips to our controller, but what we see more and more is that you actually want to lit surfaces of a platform or a panel. So that's why we made these little LED boards, aluminum LED boards, which you can also directly connect to the controller, which makes it really easy to do a surface light.
Yeah, and it's so I've got this round one here. You sent me a couple that are square. So we've got some square in different shapes and sizes.
Exactly. We have them in several sizes. You can actually also daisy chain them, so you can have multiple sections in the display light up.
Okay. And they are RGB.
If they're daisy chained, are they still programmable? Like, can you still assign each light?
That's a very good question. So we actually have two types of LED control. The one we are showing here is RGBW LED control, in which that isn't possible. But we have another type of LED control called LightMark, which uses digital LEDs. And with that method, it is possible to individually address each specific board.
Very
Thanks.
cool, very cool. Yeah, and they are RGBW. That was the other thing that we want to point out.
These are
right?
RGBW.
Right. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And then because I always forget this, power last, or power after you've connected everything, but before you turn on the BrightSign player, right?
Exactly, indeed.
Okay.
The good order is first connect the elements, then power the controller, then power the BrightSign player.
Cool. Okay.
Yep.
Let's do it. Let's see how all this works. All right. So we're going to hop over here to BrightAuthor Connected. We'll go through the next sequence. This is going to be, let's see, we are going to go back to our wildcard here one more time.
Yeah.
So new controller, new sensor. We're just going to repeat the same wildcard process before, because we just want to see what comes off of
Exactly. Yeah.
the sensor here. So BrightSign is booting up. So yeah, we've got both. We are in port 1 of this controller. So that is, again, that's important. These are enumerated 1 through 4. And we've got on the LED side, A and B are the LED controllers. So, all right, so let's send this over to the BrightSign player. And let's see what kind of data we get off of this sensor. All right. Okay, so we're going to introduce these little resin plastic discs here. These basically represent our products, right? So on the bottom of each of these, we've got our NFC stickers. And we're going to actually place them into this disc, which will detect it. So this is the RFID sensor. So as we place it in, we've got what appears to be a really complicated string of stuff coming across here.
Yeah, it does. Luckily, it actually isn't that complicated. So of course, we start again with the channel on which the sensor was connected, which is 001 in this case.
Yep.
And then the first part of the message actually indicates if a tag was detected or if the tag was being removed. So as the tag is being removed, you see that the TD becomes a TR and vice versa.
Yep.
And secondly, per default, the sensor reads out what is called a unique ID, which is basically a very long number, which is unique for each RFID tag.
So as I cycle through these, every single one of these has a UID that is unique. So all 4 of these will change to show these different values.
Indeed.
Okay. All right. So that's the raw data coming off of the sensor. I think we should also mention, by the way, too, that there's this extra component we never really acknowledged. This is the driver for this sensor.
That's a good point, indeed. So most of our sensors consist out of just one part, but the RFID sensor consists out of 2 parts. First of all, the little blue box is indeed the driver, which is always needed. And to the driver is the antenna, which is the antenna is
itself. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, indeed. And the antenna comes in all sorts of sizes and shapes. So now it's a circular one, but we also have squared ones, rectangular ones. It can be anything you need.
Right. All right. So the reason I bring that up is because this driver is a separate unit. We can actually change its behavior potentially. So in this demo, we'll go through this next step of parsing down, this data that's coming in and making it more streamlined and simplified. So this really just builds on the same concept we did with the air button. We're going to do a wildcard variation. That variation is just simply going to focus in on the tag detect, tag remove, and find that UID and put that UID into a variable. So pretty straightforward. And we're just going to cycle back and forth as we lift, as we place, that sort of thing. All right, so let's send this to the player. All right, so now what we'll do, and again, we're going to change some content on screen. So we'll place this, and you can see now we've isolated that UID. And we've changed the content. So the arrow down, arrow up,
Exactly.
arrow down, and then we can change these different UIDs, right?
Indeed.
All of these are unique.
And of course, so typically this can be used, for example, in retail stores where each product has a unique ID, and you can trigger, product-related content on your screen, for example, showing specifications or stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is all about creating events based on this incoming data.
Indeed. Yeah.
You could be as simple as just triggering the sensor, at the beginning, just nothing more than triggering it could be your event. But you might want to be more specific and say, if I trigger an event on this UID, then I do something specific with that.
Exactly.
Right.
So this could trigger like a video, or it could trigger some, like each product could have its own individual video associated with it. So somebody could go up to it and learn more about the product. Yeah, exactly. That's really cool.
And as it's, part of the sort of standard BrightAuthor features, the serial input event, you can actually link it to any sort of output or action the bright side can do, right? You could send a UDP command, or you could trigger a visual. Anything you can normally trigger or start on a BrightSign player, you can now trigger based on these sensor inputs. So that's really cool.
Exactly. But you can also trigger something on the Nexmosphere, which this is where it starts to get really cool. So we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to capture the tag detect, tag remove, but we're going to tell the light to turn on to match that action, right? So this introduces the third core concept that you have to remember in BrightAuthor Connected. We've done states, we've done events. This now introduces a concept called commands. That's sending information back to the Nexmosphere to tell it what to do. Up to this point, this has been entirely passive. We've been listening to the sensors, but now we're going to tell a device to do something. So again, it's a two-state based on lift, based on replace, like putting it back down. We're going to parse the exact same way that we've been doing this, putting in a variable, putting it on screen. But now the difference is we're going to send a command, and that command, let me zoom this in for you here. We're going to send a serial string on port 2, and we're going to turn on the light, or we're going to turn off the light based on what happens. So don't worry about the syntax. Again, Nexmosphere has done a great job documenting this stuff. It's easy to find. I mean, I copied and pasted this, in 3 seconds. So, but the point is, I'm sending a command via serial to port 2, and I'm telling that light to turn on. So let's send this over. This is where it gets really fun. All right. So we'll take our tag, we'll place it, and there we go.
Wow.
We got a light. So I can remove it. Light goes off, light goes on. Not only am I triggering the LED, but I'm changing on-screen content. And I'm assigning things to a variable. It's like a lot of stuff happening in one go there.
So did you program the on and the off as separate states and events?
I did.
Is that how it worked?
Yep. Cool. So this is one state. That's a good point. This is literally what a state looks like, right? So this is one of those building block states. Arrow up, variable, light off, and then the second state is light on, arrow down, show the variable. 2 states. That's a perfect illustration. So, and you're going to hate me for doing this, I know, because it's not what you're supposed to do, but just to show what's possible if you do this right, and you'll explain why this is not the best practice, but I just like the clean aesthetic here. We do something like this. Now we have a clean table. We can move these on and off.
But you could separate it with a few layers, perhaps, if you were doing a board install.
Yeah, so you just got really lucky, John, that this is working. So normally we advise not to install the RFID antennas near metal. And these LED boards, they are made out of metal.
Yep.
Somehow, however, it is working. So good for you.
But really cool effect. Don't do that, right? Because it's a metal disc in a radio antenna. Bad idea. But if you're a good installer and you know how to assemble these, and I think you even had a point. You told me that there's other ways to do the lighting than what I'm trying to do here. You have other options like edge light.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
right.
you can have strips which shine into a opaque platform from the sides, or shine from top down. So there are definitely different options. But this does give a very cool effect, I have to say.
Yeah. I just like that clean tabletop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell us about the ramp up of that LED? That's really cool that it dims like that. How did that happen? How does that work?
It's part of the syntax, right, of the LED button. So yeah, do you want to explain a little bit how that works?
Yeah, maybe if you can show the syntax quickly on the screen. So indeed, it is part of the command. So in that command, which we see over here, you have full control over the color, the brightness, and the ramp time. So if we break down what's in between the brackets, we basically say, okay, we want to activate LED channel A. We want to set it to color 0, which in this case is white.
Let's do a different color. Let's do what's 3? 3 green?
Yeah, let's do 1. It's red. I think it's probably most visible on screen as a change.
Okay. And then the ramp, or the brightness, right?
The brightness, indeed. So now that's 30, but we can also set it to 40 or 50. And the last one is the ramp time in 0.1 seconds. So if you have a 5, the ramp time will be 0.5 seconds. If we make that 5, for example, a 20, it will be a ramp time of 2 seconds. So you can really play and be creative with how you want to control the LEDs and what atmosphere you want to set.
Okay, let's send it. Just to show, I've been working with white lighting here this whole time. So same exact experience, red light. There you go.
Yep.
But you can do a lot more. I mean, you could do different color schemes. You can have saved preset colors. I mean, all sorts of possibilities.
Absolutely. You can do, make ramps which automatically go up and down, really subtle colors if you blend in the white channel. And if we actually jump back to the other LED option I was mentioning before, what we call LightMark, you can even do like these wave animations or control separate segments, so you could really go crazy.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. Okay.
Fun with LEDs.
Yeah. I love working with those. All right. So the next thing we wanted to do is, this whole time we've been working with this complicated looking UID, right? So this is another interesting feature, again, because we're using that driver. This gives us some options here, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. If you look to a unique idea, the great thing about it is unique, but it does provide a very long, complex number, which is sort of difficult to work with if you have hundreds and hundreds of products. Specifically, knowing that in retail stores, typically you have more products of the same category. Mm-hmm. So typically, you want to trigger the same content for multiple SKUs on display.
Right. Okay. So this is what we've got going on here. Is we've got a basic one state. We're just going to do wildcard, just like we've always been doing, right? But we're introducing this this state, which does a configuration of our RFID. And I know this is something you actually have preached about in best practices of establishing these sort of configuration parameters at the beginning of your presentation, so that you lock everything in exactly how it should behave, right?
Indeed. Actually, in exactly the same way as you control the LEDs, you can also send configuration settings to our sensors using these commands.
Okay.
So, for example, you can tell a sensor, simple stuff like how the status LED should behave, but also set it into a different mode. And one of the things we're going to show you now for this RFID sensor is that it can actually also read other stuff from the tag next to the unique ID. And it's something which we call labels. Right? So on the RFID tags, you can actually use your phone or this driver to program little pieces of information, again, which we call labels, to sort of give a generic name to that tag.
Yeah. So I got product classes here, right? So this is kind of what you were
Indeed,
saying
yeah.
is these are the same, these are the same. I don't care what the UIDs are, right?
No,
Right.
exactly.
Okay. So I did exactly what you said is I programmed the label of these using the sensor.
Exactly.
So when I place this, what I'm getting here as a raw string coming off is instead of that UID, I've got a label and I called it puck1. And then I've called this one over here puck2 because they actually say 1 and 2 on them. But both of these will say the exact same thing because they're both the same product category, right? So let's say these are shampoo bottles, these are the conditioner bottles. I don't care which one you pick up. You just need to get the product category, right?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. The other cool thing, like you mentioned, what I actually did with this that I found interesting is I programmed one of them using the sensor. And then I used an app on my phone and I cloned it to this other one.
Yeah.
So I could establish one and make sure that it was programmed correctly and then ended up, replicating it out using my phone really fast. So it's a good way to like build these out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just any phone with NFC read-write capabilities can do that. So that's a really neat feature. Yeah.
So, and is basically the application, the programming application is using the UID to create another abstraction layer so that it can take that UID and then affiliate it with the program that you've created?
So no, what you actually do is you actually add a piece of information onto the tag. It's the RFID tag. It's basically a small memory chip. So you can literally program the word, label 1 is puck1. And instead of focusing on the UID, we just read what label 1 is, in this case, puck1, and we trigger based on that.
Cool. So it's an actual piece of information on that chip. Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
In addition to the UID, right? Because that's kind of what you're asking, Matt. It's like the UID still exists.
Yeah.
The label exists. If I was to start reading UIDs again, the label is still there. It's just which one do you want to read? Because they're all reside on that NFC sticker. They're available, right?
Indeed.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. I mean, there's the idea of a QR code, right? And the QR code is always the same, but it can be affiliated with a different website, which is like a layer of abstraction. It's not changing the QR code really, but this is actually changing the data onto that chip, which is really cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. And just as a quick recap on this, because I saw this come across the chat, using a command to the driver, to this sensor, you can place an NFC tag in the sensor and say, program this label onto that. And it would actually write that data into the NFC tag of whatever is placed in the sensor. And that's just a basic command structure that you can send through this presentation. But the other way, which I was saying, is not only can you program it this way, but you could use an app on your phone called NFC Tools. You can read an NFC tag and you can write to another NFC tag. So I did that for a cloning example. So there's lots of ways. There's several apps. I mean, I just did a quick search. I think you guys recommend NFC Tools, but there's others that do it. I just thought it was extra cool that you can do it here. This is amazing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so last example, let's put all of this together, right? So let's combine labels and lighting in a presentation. Okay. So this really is a blend of the two examples. We're going to configure the RFID to use the labels, and then we're going to trigger light on, light off based on tag detect, tag remove. So that's all this process flow is. Cool.
And this is really how you would typically see it in a retail setup, in a retail example.
Right. Okay. There we go. So now we're reporting its label, which is a more friendly name.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we remove. So there's puck2. There's puck2. So these product categories are the same. And that's it. So we got a friendly name, on-screen content changed, variables changed, lighting is changed. That's putting a lot of stuff together there in one go.
Very
cool,
nice.
Right?
Absolutely.
All right. So I think with that, we want to actually show how you can put all this together into maybe something a bit bigger, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, what I mentioned in the beginning is, in the end, a really important question is, why would you want to add sensors
Hmm.
to a digital signage presentation? And I think really it boils down to increasing the impact of the content and really creating an engaging experiences, which people actually remember.
Yep. Okay.
So
So
yeah,
let's do that. So what I've got here on screen, it's a little bit dark, but I've got the lights down for a reason, which you'll see. We've got a basic product retail experience we're going to show, and this is something quick and dirty that I put together just to combine a lot of these concepts together and show what's possible, and relatively quickly. So I've got a video wall. It's 4 BrightSign players running seamless content in an attract loop, right? So I'm far away from this retail setup. It's just content that's generally meant to kind of attract my attention. So what'll happen is when I approach this, the light comes on. It starts to detect my presence. The closer I get, the brighter the light gets until I cross a certain threshold. And when I get close enough, I've actually triggered more specific content, which is about this product, right, or this company. So this is kind of like a landing screen or a transitional state where we are moving from that attract loop into more specific. So I can even get closer, the light will get brighter. And at this point, I can do a lift and learn feature. So I can lift this product, I can look at this product here, but now I can change all of the content on these players. I've got a video, I've got some product information, I've got some instructional, some origin story stuff here. All of this content now triggered by the fact that I've interacted with this product, and it's all done because I've got an NFC sticker here on the bottom. So if I place this back, I can reset the experience back to this state here. And in fact, I can disengage altogether. The light will dim, it'll dim, it'll dim, and at a certain point, I cross that threshold again, and I'm back to my basic attract loop. So,
I'm a storyteller, and this is just so interesting to me as like a filmmaker and a storyteller, all the possibilities that you could do. You can have sort of like choose your own adventure almost with objects, right?
right.
You could have an object that tells a story. So you lift an object and it tells you the story of that object. I can see this, I can see a lot of creative potential making these interactive presentations.
Absolutely.
absolutely. And imagine just this being a simple display with only the coffee below it and nothing else, just looping content, versus really indeed the journey and the experiences John just showed us. I think it's such a big difference and really gives a great example on how big of an impact sensors and also LED lighting can have on these these retail experiences, these museum experiences, to really become something people actually enjoy going to.
Yeah. And in fact, using these basic concepts throughout, what we've talked about today to make this, the hardest part of this was the content.
Yeah,
It's finding the content, building the content, making sure like the experience was correct and appropriate and looked good, right? The building was
yeah.
actually the easy part.
And actually, what's actually not mentioned yet is, I believe those are 4 separate monitors, right? Which you are all
Yep,
synchronizing based on the input of a presence sensor, the RFID sensor, and you're controlling the LED lighting. And you all
exactly.
do that from one single BrightAuthor connected presentation.
Yep, yeah. So it's 4
And
screens and a video
yeah,
wall. The upper left screen is actually the one that all of this Nexmosphere stuff is attached to. So, and you can
right.
actually see at the very, very bottom corner, there's a little sensor to the front of the desk, and that's what triggers that presence detection.
That's the presence sensor. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So, yeah, just I thought it was a great example of just showing how to put all these pieces together and do something. So,
Absolutely. And it's also a great example on how you can combine multiple sensors to build up a great story, right? With the presence and the lift sensor.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have got a few more minutes left. Before we get to Q&A, there's one last thing that we wanted to go through, which is definitely really important. And this is something to to keep in mind as a possibility. So what we've been showing up to this point is everything done in BrightAuthor connected, right? All of the the presentation layer, the connection to the sensors, the on-screen content is all stuff generated in BrightAuthor connected. But that's not the only way. It's not your only option with working with Nexmosphere. The other is if you wanted to run this entirely as an HTML-based application. So not using BrightAuthor connected, if you have better strength, and resources in building HTML or JavaScript applications, you can create all of your experience from ground up directly onto the BrightSign player in that workflow. So that's what I actually want to show now is what that looks like. So I'm actually going to pull the card out and switch my presentation content to show you exactly what we've got. And these are the building blocks to keep in mind. Again, very, very high level overview. If you're interested in doing this, if you want some help, if you want some, some guidance on how to implement something like this, definitely reach out to us. We'll provide these appropriate resources. But really, this comes down to 3 pieces. I've got a custom auto run, which is the native executable that runs on a BrightSign player. This is written in a language called BrightScript. You don't have to worry about the syntax. All you have to know is that this is establishing the fact that I'm running an HTML application on my player. That's literally all it does. It just sets the player up to point to my HTML app that I've developed. On the HTML side, the markup is, again, very simple. I'm going to use a background video, and I'm going to put some text on the screen that shows what my sensor is sending. And then the last piece, really, I mean, it's probably arguably the most important piece, is the JavaScript that makes the connection. So in BrightAuthor, we showed that serial port connection configuration, mapping port 2 and setting all those parameters that Nexmosphere has provided. We do all that exact same stuff in JavaScript. You can establish that connection. You can read the data coming off of the Nexmosphere controllers and the sensors. You can also send data back to things like LEDs, all through JavaScript. So what that means is you now have complete full creative control in your HTML application to build whatever you want, and you can seamlessly talk to and receive information from the Nexmosphere.
You can also work with JavaScript developers to help you out with this, right?
Absolutely.
Like you could have a more differentiated group of people working with you.
Yep, that's exactly right. So, and that's that can be an issue, is just working with the strengths of your team. If you are used to building your apps in HTML and JavaScript, then this might be the right angle. So so let's power this up. We'll show you what this looks like. Again, I'm just using a basic auto run, basic HTML, and kind of a bare bones JavaScript to get all the connectivity done. And we're going to use the exact same setup here of the RFID and the light and all that other stuff. So we'll give this a second to power up. It's going to look exactly the same as the BrightAuthor connected. That's kind of the beauty of it. So let's see. Get the screen to cycle here. All right, here we go. Okay, so we are now running custom auto run, HTML, JavaScript. We're connected to USB 0. And again, I'm just going to read the raw data coming off of my sensor. Now, of course, because I haven't powered cycled the driver is still in label mode from before, which is cool. So all of this is being generated using just the JavaScript. Now, what you can do additionally to this, which I think is really exciting from prototype developing, testing, that sort of thing, because it's an HTML app running on a BrightSign player, what you can do is connect remotely to it through the inspector server. So you can open your Chrome browser, you can open up an inspector, you can actually see this application running live on a BrightSign player, and you can connect to it. And so as you see here, this is basically the live console output of what's happening on this player with these sensors. So you can see the same content I've got coming across the screen. I'm actually console logging this via JavaScript and showing this coming through. So that's really exciting. So it means Now that you know that data is coming through, you can do anything you want with it. Changing on-screen content, changing the experience, CSS animations, videos, that sort of thing. A lot of creative potential there. And then the last thing I'll show you is, so this is reading data live. One thing I've added to this is a little function that I can talk back to the Nexmosphere, which I think is really cool, especially from a learning standpoint. So I made myself a little function here, and I can send commands back to the Nexmosphere. So I can go through your documentation, find the syntax. I want to turn the light on. I know this is a syntax for a white light, 30%. And there we go.
Turn it on from the JavaScript. Wow.
Turn it on from JavaScript. Yep. So let me turn it back off, and I'll switch that 30 to a 0. And off it goes.
Now you're looking at a console view. Is there also like a preview, so you wouldn't necessarily have to use the display or use the BrightSign player? Could you like see a preview of it in HTML?
You could, but the HTML in this case would be what's running on the screen, right? So the HTML presentation is the on-screen, right? So this console really is kind of for that learning prototyping stage of just connecting to your app and kind of talking to your app in real time. Where the BrightAuthor connected workflow is a little bit hamstrung by the fact that you can't really preview it until you publish it, and that step-by-step process of iterating is really difficult. This is live. I'm talking to it in real time. I think that's kind of the beauty of it.
Got it.
You wouldn't do this in for production, right? Because you would actually program your experience in HTML and JavaScript, and it's all about the on-screen and the interactive components. So I definitely want to show that. Just it's because it's possible. It's something we see a lot of times. People are asking for. They want information about how to do it. So by all means, reach out. Absolutely, we're glad to help do that.
Yeah.
All right. I think we are right about top of the hour. It's good timing.
Yeah, really great timing. We have a bunch of questions that came through in the chat. And
let's do one quick thing first before that. Just
indeed. So maybe before we go to the Q&A, it's good to know where you can find some more information about our products. So maybe to start, we have a YouTube channel which has all sorts of product videos, but also application videos. So that's definitely fun to go through and learn a bit more about our products. How to use them, how to install them, and all the technical documentation like the syntax, how to install the sensors, etc., can all be found on our support documentation web page. Now, and if you have any projects or applications for which you would like advice, on what sensors to use, what products you need, you can always send us an email at applications@nexmosphere.com.
That's great. And I just got to say, your documentation and your resources are amazing. So, for me to pick them up
really good to hear.
For the first time, try to learn this. Yeah, it was a breeze. Yeah. So you guys have done a great job with that.
Yeah.
John, thank you so much. Go ahead, Ivo.
Sorry, Matt. No, there was just one more thing I would like to mention also as a follow-up on the JavaScript and actually also the BrightAuthor. So there are actually also a few mutual CMS partners of Nexmosphere and BrightSign, which also have implemented the Nexmosphere platform for BrightSign. For example, Intuitive Face or Signage Live have done a really great job. So if you like those platforms and you also want to use sensors, by all means, go for it, because it's possible.
Yeah, that's a really great point. It's, we are not trying to steer you in any one particular direction. The point here is you have options. By all means, reach out to either of us, both of us, company-wise, and let's make sure you get the right solution in your hands.
John and Ivo, thank you so much for putting this presentation together. It was really great to see exactly how the Nexmosphere Xperience platform works. I learned a lot. It was just a wonderful presentation, and I just want to thank everybody online for joining us today. And with that being said, let's take some questions. Absolutely. All right, so the first question we have is, it says, so a Nexmosphere trigger is always a USB input and not for the example of a USB within BrightAuthor. So I think it's asking about the event type. Is it always a serial input?
Yes, it's always a serial event input, although the
Right.
connection is USB. So the technical term, like the nerdy term would be, it's that it's a virtual COM port on the USB over which the serial ports are being sent.
Serials that, like, the icon still is that old school icon of a serial port, but
Yeah.
it's not around anymore. So
No.
it works through USB, right?
Oh, it's still
Exactly,
around. It's still the
Yeah.
DB9.
Oh,
is
it's still around.
alive and well.
Just not on our on our players.
Yeah.
And I think also, yes, there is a USB event type, and for Nexmosphere you would use the serial event type.
Exactly.
And in fact,
always a serial event.
Yeah, in fact, to add on to that, the JavaScript version of this is taking the physical USB port, creating a virtual serial COM port in order to bridge that connection and make that pathway possible. So in both cases, it's the identical thing, and it is serial.
So we have a question that came through the chat, and I'd like to ask it here. Oliver asks, "Hey, thanks for such great product. I think it's so great what you're doing, but what's missing is definitely a preview like there is in BrightAuthor 4.7. So, and then he goes on to say it's very difficult to test in the dark without a preview." And John, do you just want to weigh in on that a bit? I know that you've had that same frustration, but you have some workarounds for that.
A little bit, yeah. And I think the first example of setting up a basic presentation with wildcard and just getting it on the screen is a useful way. You know, just setting up a tabletop example like we did, a single one state wildcard, put the text on the screen, learn what the syntax is. That's how I did it to get started. The HTML JavaScript is another great example, but it is fundamentally the same thing. You know, it's creating that serial connection, listening for the events, and just whatever happens, getting it on the screen. So, I mean, that's kind of the best I can recommend. But the other thing to consider too, by the way, I noticed this as well, and Ivo, maybe you can second this, is that when you're building your content, your experience, right? Like the video wall that I've got behind me, I built that irrespective of the Nexmosphere. You know, I built that with basically manual triggers, step by step, that worked my way through the experience, and didn't even introduce the Nexmosphere until I had that done, and then just basically replaced my triggers with the Nexmosphere sensor, right? So they're almost two separate processes.
Well, absolutely. You can, when you're building your presentation, you can just use any other input for testing, and then in the end switch it for the serial inputs with the Nexmosphere commands.
Right.
But really, to your point, John, it's something we always recommend people to do, is just have this simple presentation in which you see the serial events pop up live on the screen, and it works just so well to understand how the syntax is, you know, and what you actually need to place in the serial input to have the correct triggers.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to weigh in a little bit about the preview idea and say that if you have your players set up with local file networking, so they're on your local network, it's really easy to iterate that way. You can and publish to the players over and over again. So yes, there's not a preview, but really you want to see what's happening on a screen in real life. And that's the best preview there is. So that's kind of what we've decided that we want to focus on, is iteration through actually seeing what's happening on a screen in a test environment. So, and that's the way I like to work too.
Yeah, and even if you really would like to sort of copy paste the commands in BrightAuthor, you could actually just also connect the set to your laptop. Just open any terminal program, and the commands would appear as well. You could just copy paste them into your BrightAuthor connected software. So that's a second possibility.
Yeah. And actually, one more thing to answer that question, right? Our CMS partners might actually do a better job of that live preview. I have seen in some cases, especially like the Signage Live we saw recently, you can build your zones of content, and you actually do get a much better preview on certain platforms for that. So that might
Good
also be a
point.
consideration, is if the workflow in BrightAuthor Connected doesn't suit you, definitely check out, the CMS partner route or the HTML JavaScript route. So again, options.
Totally. And then, so we have an anonymous question, but it's a pretty simple one. Are there sample presentations available?
Yes. So also on our support documentation website, there is a link. I think it's called example library, and then you can click through to BrightSign, and then there's a whole list of example presentations which people can have a look at. Use, reshuffle, whatever you want to do with it.
Great. So we have a two-part question coming up. So I'll flash it on the screen. So Edward asks, so let's say we have a retail store with many sensors, like 20 plus sensors, and they're activated by products for an installation with custom content. Okay, that's the first part. And then the second part is, what would be the best practice for making that tag management manageable for the end user?
And the end user being the store owner, let's say, or the store personnel.
I think that's the question, yeah.
Right, so typically, I think what's always a good idea is to basically what we've shown with POC1 and POC2, to categorize your products and to make sure that you also have some spare tags for each category, so that if new stock is coming in, you can just see, okay, hey, this is shampoo number A. I just add that tag to it, and it will work. So I think that's a really important one, to always have some spare tags. Make sure those are already programmed with the right label. And of course, it's always that the more product categories you have, the more content you have, it will become a bit more. Well, I wouldn't say complex, but probably a bit more work to make sure that everything stays in line. But it's really just repeating the same concept over and over again.
Yeah. What's the largest product variety deployment you've seen? Like the largest, different number of products that someone's implemented?
So what I've seen, I think it's around 600.
Oof, wow.
I believe. Yeah.
So it can be done.
Oh, it can definitely be done. And there are, projects in the pipeline for much bigger numbers. But of course, in the end, there's always the action of adding the tag to a physical product, which needs to be done. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Edward did follow up, and he just says, yeah, like store people, like people in the store, how do they do the tag management? So I think we're right on with the answer.
Yeah.
And then we have one more question from JB. JB asks, can you switch on and off like a high-powered light, like a ceiling light in a museum, for instance? Do they have to be those LEDs, or is there a way to, control a larger lighting area?
Yeah, so we have an element called the X.io, which is an I/O interface. And we actually also offer a relay switch, which you can connect to that. So over which you can basically switch on and off, I believe in the States it's 110 volts.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You can basically switch on and off, so you can connect any lighting or appliance to it and control it with using the same concepts we've shown, right? So just by sending a command in BrightAuthor to the Nexmosphere platform.
And then we just have one more question, and then I'll follow up with a general answer to a question that was asked a bunch of times. So this question is just in the chat, and somebody who's asking about programming RFIDs. They just wanted a little more clarification on how to program an RFID sticker.
Right, so there are two options. One of them is using the little driver we've shown before, and basically sending commands to it, telling how to program the tag which is placed on the antenna. Right, so basically you tell the driver, okay, the tag which is currently on the antenna, label 1 should be POC2, and label 2 should be category A or something like that, whatever it is you want to program. So that's
Right.
option 1. The other option is using a smartphone with NFC capabilities and an NFC writing application. For example, the one which we recommend, it's called NFC Tools. And you basically do the same. You type into the app what you want to program, or you can actually read it from a tag which is already programmed. And then you say, okay, write the tag which is being held in front of my phone. So those are the 2 options. Use our RFID driver or use your phone with NFC capabilities.
And I tried the phone version of that, and it was incredibly fast, because once I got the reference tag cloned and saved, it actually saves in your NFC Tools application. You can actually hit the right button, tap, and you're done. It's literally 2 seconds. So right tap,
Exactly.
right tap, right tap. You could actually roll out a large number of these pretty quickly.
And maybe just to add, for really mass deployments, of course, it is possible to approach NFC tag manufacturers, provide them with the data which needs to be on the NFC tags, and then they come right out of the factory the way you want them to be.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That could be really cool too. The Internet of Things, right? That's where we're going.
Yeah.
So the question that came up a few times is just basically, a few people asked, will this recording be available after the show? And the answer to that is absolutely. So we will edit this a bit and post this as a video on demand, a VOD, very soon. And it will be available for review for all of you. So yeah, with that, I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us. Thank Ivo and John for the great presentation. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. Thanks a lot.
Thank you guys too.
Thanks, Ivo.
Thanks.